Blood is supposed to be thicker than water, but for 23-year-old Ash Mitchell, it was just the currency her mother used to clear a $250,000 gambling debt. Sold to Boston's most ruthless mafia boss to save her mother's skin, the terrified, overweight young woman expected a short, brutal life locked in a monster's basement. Handed over like worthless collateral, she braced herself for a nightmare of abuse. But what the terrifying Blue Rossi actually did to her behind the iron gates of his fortress didn't destroy her. It sparked a jaw-dropping transformation that would ultimately bring the entire syndicate to its knees. The cramped, second-floor apartment in South Boston always smelled of stale cigarette smoke, cheap gin, and impending disaster. For Ash Mitchell, it was a prison long before the mob ever showed up. At 23, Ash carried the heavy physical and emotional weight of a lifetime of trauma. She weighed nearly 250 pounds, a fact her mother, Patricia, used as a daily weapon. "Who's going to look at you, Ash? You're lucky I let you stay here," was the soundtrack of her life. Ash hid in her oversized sweaters, burying her anxieties in the fleeting comfort of sugar and the worn pages of her old culinary school textbooks. She had dropped out of the Cambridge School of Culinary Arts 3 years ago, when Patricia emptied her tuition savings account to fund a surefire blackjack streak at a clandestine casino near the Encore Boston Harbor. That streak had failed, and Patricia's debts had only metastasized. It was a Tuesday night, raining in heavy, relentless sheets against the cracked window of their living room, when the front door didn't just open. It exploded inward, the deadbolt splintering the doorframe. Ash gasped, dropping her mug of tea as it shattered across the linoleum. 3 men walked in. They didn't look like the thugs from the movies. There were no tracksuits or baseball bats. They wore impeccably tailored dark suits, their shoes gleaming despite the rain. The air in the room instantly grew cold, suffocating under the weight of their silent, lethal authority. Leading them was an older man with silver hair and a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Real names rarely circulated in Patricia's circles without a whisper of dread attached to them, but Ash knew this man's face from her mother's terrified, drunken ramblings. It was Sal Vitiello, the enforcer for the Rossi syndicate. Patricia, who had been passed out on the sofa, jolted awake, her bloodshot eyes widening in absolute terror. Sal, wait! I have the money coming! I swear to God, I have a tip on a horse at—" "The tracks at Suffolk Downs have been closed for years, Patty," Sal interrupted, his voice a raspy, quiet rasp that was somehow louder than a scream. He didn't even look at her. He looked around the miserable apartment with overt disgust. "You owe Mr. Rossi $250,000. The grace period ended at midnight. It's now 1:15 a.m. "I just need 1 more week," Patricia begged, scrambling off the couch and dropping to her knees, clutching her hands together. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll get a second job. I'll sell the car." "The car is a rusted 2008 Civic, Patty. It pays for the gas it takes to drive it to the scrapyard," Sal said, nodding slightly to the 2 massive men behind him. They stepped forward, their hands casually slipping into their jackets. Ash was frozen against the kitchen counter, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She couldn't breathe. Her asthma flared, her chest tightening as she watched the men move in on her mother. "Wait!" Patricia shrieked, her voice cracking. In a moment of frantic, animalistic self-preservation, Patricia's head snapped toward the kitchen. Her eyes locked onto Ash. There was no maternal love in that gaze. There was only a desperate, chilling calculation. "Take her," Patricia blurted out, her finger trembling as she pointed at her own daughter. Silence fell over the room. Even Sal paused, his thick brows furrowing. "Excuse me?" "Take Ash," Patricia babbled, scrambling to her feet. "She's 23. She can work. She's strong. She can clean your clubs. She can wash dishes. She can entertain. Take her as collateral. Her life for my debt. Just until I get the money. Please." Ash's stomach plummeted. The world tilted on its axis, the edges of her vision going dark. "Mom," she whispered, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Sal slowly turned his gaze toward Ash. His eyes dragged over her trembling, heavy frame, her messy bun, the oversized grey hoodie stained with spilled tea. He looked back at Patricia, a flicker of genuine revulsion crossing his hardened features. "You're selling your own kid, Patty? And no offense, but she doesn't exactly fit the profile for the entertainment venues." "She can work!" Patricia screamed, ignoring the insult to her daughter, entirely consumed by her own survival. "She owes me. I gave her life. She's yours. Just don't kill me." Sal stared at Patricia for a long, agonizing moment. Then he pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket, hit a speed dial, and pressed it to his ear. "Mr. Rossi." "Yeah, it's Sal. Patty's broke, but she's offering a trade." Sal listened for a moment, his eyes never leaving Ash. "Her daughter. Yeah. 20-something. A pause. No, boss. She's heavy. Plump. Definitely not club material. Looks terrified." Ash wanted to run, but her legs felt like lead. She was trapped in a nightmare, paralyzed by the sheer, unfathomable betrayal of the woman who had given birth to her. "Understood," Sal said into the phone, hanging up. He gestured to his men. "Grab the girl. No, please." Ash finally found her voice, a raw, tearful sob as the two men closed the distance in 3 strides. One of them clamped a massive, calloused hand around her upper arm, his grip like a steel vice. "Be a good girl for them, Ash," Patricia yelled from the background, practically weeping with relief as she backed away. "I'll come get you when I have the money. I promise." Ash didn't even have time to scream before she was dragged out the door, her sneakers slipping on the wet stairs. She was shoved into the back of a blacked-out Cadillac Escalade, waiting in the alley. The doors slammed shut, sealing her in with the scent of expensive leather and gunpowder. As the SUV peeled away into the rainy Boston night, Ash pressed her face against the tinted glass, watching her dingy street fade into the darkness. She wasn't just a captive, she was a piece of garbage, discarded by the only family she had, sold to monsters to pay for a losing hand. The drive felt like an eternity. Ash sat huddled in the corner of the spacious back seat, her arms wrapped tightly around her stomach. She was crying silently, her tears soaking into the collar of her hoodie. She expected them to drive to some abandoned warehouse by the docks, or a seedy underground basement in the South End. She imagined being chained to a radiator, forced to scrub floors until her hands bled, or worse, starved and beaten in a dark room. Given her weight, she had always felt invisible to men. But the dark corners of the criminal underworld were known for horrors that didn't discriminate. Instead, after 45 minutes of driving, the Escalade turned off a quiet, tree-lined road in the affluent suburb of Weston. Giant wrought-iron gates swung open silently, revealing a sprawling 3-story stone mansion bathed in the glow of discreet landscaping lights. It looked like a modern fortress. The SUV parked near the grand entrance. The door was opened for her, and Sal gestured with his chin. "Out!" Ash stumbled as she stepped out into the rain, her legs trembling so violently she nearly collapsed on the wet cobblestones. Sal caught her by the elbow, hauling her upright with surprising gentleness, though his grip was firm. "Walk," he ordered. She was led through heavy mahogany double doors into a foyer that looked like it belonged in a European palace. Marble floors, a sweeping double staircase, and the quiet hum of central heating. It was a stark, dizzying contrast to the squalor she had just been sold out of. "In here," Sal directed, guiding her down a wide hallway and opening a door to a massive, dimly lit study. The room smelled of old paper, rich leather, and a faint hint of expensive cigar smoke. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled to the brim. At the far end of the room, behind a massive oak desk, sat a man. Blue Rossi. He didn't look like a mob boss. He wasn't old, fat, or dripping in gaudy gold jewelry. He looked to be in his mid-30s. He wore a crisp white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and faint, intricate tattoos peeking out from beneath the fabric. His hair was dark, styled neatly, but his eyes were what made the air leave Ash's lungs. They were a piercing, cold slate grey. They held a terrifying stillness, an absolute lack of hesitation. Blue didn't look up from the file he was reading as she was brought in. "Boss." "The collateral," Sal announced, letting go of Ash's arm and taking a step back. Blue slowly closed the file, setting his pen down. He leaned back in his leather chair and finally looked at her. Ash instantly shrank into herself. She crossed her arms, trying to physically hide her body, wishing she could sink into the Persian rug beneath her feet. She was acutely aware of her messy appearance, her wet hair plastered to her cheeks, her round face flushed with panic. She waited for the disgust. She waited for the sneer that she had received from people her entire life. Blue's expression didn't change. He simply assessed her. It was a clinical, penetrating gaze that felt like it was stripping away her skin and examining her bones. "Ash Mitchell," Blue said. His voice was a deep, smooth baritone. It was calm, which somehow made it infinitely more intimidating. 23, unemployed, no criminal record, living with a mother who has a sickness for the blackjack table. Ash swallowed hard, a tiny, pathetic squeak escaping her throat. Please, I don't have anything. I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize for your mother's sins, Miss Mitchell," Blue said, standing up. He was tall, moving with a silent, predatory grace as he walked around the desk. He stopped a few feet from her. "But a debt is a debt. And in my world, debts are paid. If not with money, then with utility." Ash shut her eyes tightly, bracing herself. "I'll clean. I'll scrub the floors. I can do laundry. Just please don't hurt me." Blue let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. "I don't need a maid, Ash. I have a staff of 10 who handle the cleaning." He looked at Sal. "Sal, you can go. Tell the men at the gate, no one comes in tonight." "Yes, boss," Sal said, bowing his head slightly before exiting the room, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Ash was alone with him. Her heart was beating so fast, she felt dizzy. "Look at me," Blue commanded softly. Ash slowly opened her eyes, looking up at him. "Your mother thinks you are a burden," Blue stated, not as an insult, but as a matter of fact. "She traded you because she views you as completely worthless, save for the manual labor your body can provide. Is that correct?" Tears spilled over Ash's cheeks. She hated him for saying it out loud, but she couldn't deny it. She gave a small, jerky nod. Blue stared at her for a long moment. Then he walked past her, opening the study door. "Mrs. Gable," he called out into the hallway. A moment later, a pleasant-looking older woman in a neat grey dress hurried over. "Yes, Mr. Rossi. Take Miss Mitchell to the East Wing guest suite. Draw her a hot bath. Find her some clean clothes to sleep in. She's exhausted." Ash's head whipped around, staring at him in utter disbelief. "A guest suite? A bath? Mr. Rossi, I don't understand," Ash stammered, her voice shaking. Blue paused, looking back at her. His cold eyes held a flicker of something she couldn't decipher. "You've had a traumatic night, Ash. Go to sleep. Your door will be locked from the outside. Do not try the windows. They are alarmed, and my security dogs patrol the grounds. We will discuss your future and how you will pay off $250,000 tomorrow morning." Before she could ask another question, he closed the study door. Mrs. Gable gave Ash a sympathetic, if slightly guarded, smile. "Come along, dear. Let's get you out of those wet clothes." Ash followed the housekeeper up the grand staircase, moving like a zombie. She was led into a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. It had a massive king-sized bed, soft ambient lighting, and an adjoining marble bathroom. It was beautiful. It was luxurious. But as Mrs. Gable left, the heavy, undeniable click of the deadbolt locking from the outside echoed through the silent room. Ash collapsed onto the edge of the pristine white comforter, burying her face in her hands. She was a prisoner in a golden cage, completely at the mercy of a man who held the power of life and death in his hands, and as she finally broke down into loud, ugly sobs, she knew one terrifying truth. Whatever Blue Rossi wanted from her, it was going to be far more complicated than scrubbing floors. Taines was bright and unforgiving, acting as a harsh reminder that the nightmare of the previous night was entirely real. Ash awoke with a start, her body aching from the tension she had held even in her sleep. She was wearing a set of incredibly soft, oversized silk pajamas that Mrs. Gable had provided. At exactly 8 a.m., the lock on her door clicked loudly. Mrs. Gable entered, carrying a tray with a pot of coffee, but she didn't set it down. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell. Mr. Rossi expects you in the dining room in 15 minutes. There are fresh clothes in the closet for you. Please do not keep him waiting." Panic immediately flooded Ash's system. She scrambled out of bed. In the closet, she found a simple, high-quality black dress that surprisingly accommodated her plus-size frame, along with fresh undergarments. Whoever Blue Rossi had on his staff, they were terrifyingly efficient at procuring whatever was needed at a moment's notice. She washed her face, brushed her hair back into a tight, neat bun, and walked out of the room. A large man in a suit, a guard, was waiting in the hallway. He didn't speak, just pointed down the stairs. Ash was escorted into a dining room that looked out over a sprawling, manicured lawn. Blue was already seated at the head of a long mahogany table, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, reading a newspaper on a tablet. A lavish breakfast spread of eggs, bacon, pastries, and fruit was laid out, but Ash's stomach churned violently at the sight of food. "Sit," Blue said, not looking up from his tablet. Ash pulled out a chair halfway down the table and sat on the very edge of it, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Blue set the tablet down and picked up his coffee cup. He took a slow sip, his slate-grey eyes locking onto hers. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive, until Ash felt like she might shatter under the pressure. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries, Ash," Blue began, his voice crisp. "Your mother owes my organization $250,000. With the vigorish, the interest, that number is closer to $300,000. If I put you on the street to sell drugs, you'd be arrested in an hour. If I put you in a club, as your mother so elegantly suggested, you wouldn't make a dime. You possess no criminal skills, no political leverage, and no money." Ash flinched at the harsh, undeniable truth of his words. She looked down at the table. "Then why keep me? Why not just get rid of me?" she whispered, terrified of the answer. "Because I despise waste," Blue replied smoothly. "And because my background check on you yielded an interesting piece of information." He picked up a manila folder from the table and flipped it open. 3 years ago, you were enrolled at the Cambridge School of Culinary Arts. You were at the top of your class in the Pastry and Baking Arts program. Your instructors noted you had a rare, intuitive gift for flavor profiles. You dropped out in your 4th semester. Why? Ash was stunned. The Mafia Boss had pulled her culinary school transcripts. My mother, she stammered. She stole the money I had saved for the final tuition payment. I couldn't afford to finish. I had to get a job at a diner to pay the rent. Blue nodded slowly. A waste of talent due to a parasite, a common tragedy. He closed the folder. Here is your reality, Ash. My syndicate is currently transitioning several heavily scrutinized cash flows into legitimate, taxable businesses. The FBI is watching my family very closely. I recently acquired a historic, failing bakery in the North End, La Bella Forno. It is highly visible, a neighborhood staple, and perfectly positioned to process a massive amount of cash, provided it looks like a booming, legitimate business. Ash blinked, struggling to keep up. Okay? I cannot put one of my men in charge of a bakery. The feds would see right through it, Blue continued, leaning forward, resting his forearms on the table. I need a civilian, a clean face, someone with verifiable, documented culinary training who can actually run the back of the house, bake the product, and make the business legitimately successful while my accountants handle the specialized bookkeeping in the back office. He pointed a finger at her. I need you. Ash's jaw dropped. You want me to run a bakery? I am offering you a job, Miss Mitchell, Blue corrected her. You will be the head baker and the public face of La Bella Forno. The bakery will pay you a handsome salary. 90% of that salary will go directly to paying off your mother's debt. 10% is yours to keep. You will live here under my roof, where I can keep an eye on my investment. Once the $300,000 is cleared, you walk away a free woman. No strings attached. It sounded like a dream. It sounded insane. Why would you trust me to do this? She asked, her voice trembling. I haven't baked professionally in years. Look at me. I'm a mess. I can barely walk up a flight of stairs without losing my breath. I hide in my room. I'm a loser. Blue's expression hardened. He stood up and walked slowly toward her. Ash shrank back in her chair as he loomed over her. You are exactly what your mother made you believe you are, Blue said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intense register. You are soft. You are undisciplined. You seek comfort in food and hide behind your weight as a shield from the world because you are terrified of failing. Tears sprang to Ash's eyes. The blunt, brutal honesty felt like a physical slap to the face. But, Blue continued, placing his hands on the table on either side of her chair, trapping her in his space. I do not invest in failure. If you are going to run a business for the Rossi family, you cannot be weak. You cannot be a victim. You need stamina to work a 14-hour shift in a hot kitchen. You need confidence to bark orders at suppliers. You cannot run my front if you cannot even run your own life. He backed away, giving her room to breathe. Therefore, the deal comes with conditions. Absolute, non-negotiable conditions. Ash swallowed, her heart pounding. What conditions? Starting today, you belong to my regimen, Blue stated. You will be up at 5 a.m. every single day. I have hired a private trainer and a nutritionist. They will break you down and build you back up. You will learn discipline. You will train your body so that it serves you rather than limits you. You will study business management for 2 hours every evening. I don't give a damn about making you skinny, Ash. I care about making you formidable, because a weak woman cannot survive in my world, And right now, you are standing dead center in it." Ash stared at the terrifying man before her. He wasn't offering her a fairy tale romance. He wasn't saving her out of the goodness of his heart. He was offering her a brutal, grueling path to clear a debt she never asked for. But beneath the cold, calculating exterior of a mafia boss, Blue Rossi was offering her something no one else ever had, a chance to take control of her own life. He held out his hand. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Mitchell? Or do you want to go back to the couch in South Boston and wait for Sal to find another use for you?" Trembling, terrified, yet feeling a strange, tiny spark of defiance ignite in her chest for the first time in her life, Ash reached out. Her small, shaking hand grasped his large, calloused one. "We have a deal," she whispered. And just like that, the fat, discarded girl from South Boston shook hands with the devil, unaware that the hell he was about to put her through was exactly what she needed to learn how to fly. The transition from a discarded daughter to the front woman of a mafia money laundering operation didn't happen gracefully. It started at 5 a.m. the very next morning, accompanied by the shrill, unforgiving scream of a digital alarm clock. Blue Rossi was a man of his word. Waiting in the mansion's sprawling, state-of-the-art basement gym was Victor, a terrifyingly stoic ex-Marine whose definition of a warm-up felt like a near-death experience. For the first 2 weeks, Ash existed in a state of agonizing, full-body soreness. Victor didn't scream at her, nor did he shame her for her 250-pound frame. He simply demanded compliance. She pushed heavy sleds across turf, slammed battle ropes until her forearms cramped, and walked grueling inclines on the treadmill. She threw up twice in the first week. Both times Victor handed her a towel, a bottle of electrolyte water, and pointed back to the mat. "Mr. Rossi doesn't require you to be a runway model," Victor grunted one morning, as Ash lay gasping on the floor, sweat pooling beneath her. "He requires you to be unbreakable. You cannot run a commercial kitchen if your spine gives out after 6 hours. Get up." And she did, because the alternative was returning to the squalor of South Boston and the mother who had sold her like cheap cattle. By 9 a.m. each day, the physical torture ended, and the professional crucible began. Blue had the deed to La Bella Forno, transferred into a newly minted LLC with Ash's name listed as the sole proprietor. The bakery, located on Hanover Street, right in the bustling heart of Boston's North End, was a historic relic. It smelled of rancid fry oil, stale yeast, and decades of neglect. When Ash first walked in, flanked by 2 of Blue's silent men in dark suits, the existing staff, a resentful assistant baker named Rosa, and a scowling barista named Leo, looked at her with undisguised contempt. They saw a heavy, soft-spoken girl masquerading as a boss. "Listen to me," Ash told them on her 3rd day, her voice shaking as she stared at a batch of burnt biscotti Rosa had supposedly forgotten in the ovens. "I know you don't respect me. I know who owns this building, and I know exactly what happens in the back office every Thursday night." She lowered her voice, leaning in over the stainless steel prep table. "But if this front fails, the men in the back go down. And if they go down, they will take us with them. So you are going to use the King Arry Sir Lancelot flour I ordered. You are going to calibrate these ovens. And you are going to do exactly what I say, or I will have Sal Vitiello come down here and manage human resources. Are we clear?" Rosa swallowed hard, the color draining from her face. "Yes, chef." It was the first time anyone had called her that. A terrifying thrill shot down Ash's spine. She poured her anxiety, her fear, and her latent anger into the dough. She dragged her exhausted body out of bed every morning and baked like her life depended on it. because it did. She introduced a blood orange and ricotta sfogliatella that required hours of meticulous, physically demanding lamination of the dough. She hauled 50-pound bags of sugar from the storeroom, refusing to let the delivery men do it for her, treating it as an extension of Victor's gym. The bakery transformed. The display cases, once filled with sad, mass-produced pastries, now gleamed with artisan tarts, perfectly piped cannoli, and dark, rich Valrhona chocolate torts. The neighborhood noticed. The line started spilling out the door onto Hanover Street, and in the back office, Blue's accountants quietly funneled thousands of dollars of illicit syndicate cash through the booming register receipts. But the success brought a different kind of heat. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when a man in a cheap, off-the-rack tan trench coat walked into La Bella Forno. He bypassed the line and stood at the glass counter, flashing a gold badge at Ash. Special Agent Thomas Sterling, FBI Organized Crime Task Force, the man said, his eyes scanning the bakery, noting the two bulky men pretending to read newspapers at a corner table. He looked back at Ash, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "You must be Ash Mitchell, the new, proud owner of a sudden North End gold mine." Ash's heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands, dusted in powdered sugar, trembled, so she immediately wiped them on her apron and crossed her arms, standing her ground. "Can I help you with something, Agent Sterling? A coffee? A pastry?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. Sterling leaned over the counter, invading her space. "I'm just curious, Miss Mitchell. A girl with 0 credit, who dropped out of culinary school 3 years ago, suddenly buys a prime piece of commercial real estate in cash and turns a profit margin that defies the laws of economics. I know Blue Rossi owns you. I just haven't figured out how he's making the books balance. Yet." Ash looked him dead in the eye, channeling the cold, absolute stillness she had seen in Blue. "I don't know who Mr. Rossi is. I secured a private loan from an angel investor who believed in my business plan. My profit margins are high because my sfogliatella is the best in the city. Now, unless you have a warrant to search my kitchen, I have a massive catering order to fulfill for a wedding at the Boston Harbor Hotel. You are holding up my line." Sterling's smirk vanished. He stared at her, clearly surprised by the steel beneath her soft exterior. He tapped the glass counter twice. "I'll be watching, Ash. One slipped decimal point, and I'll tear this place down to the studs." When he left, Ash rushed into the walk-in refrigerator, closed the heavy metal door, and collapsed against a stack of butter boxes, finally letting out a ragged, terrified sob. She was in so deep. She was protecting a mob boss, lying to the FBI, and living on a razor's edge. Suddenly, the heavy door swung open. Blue stood there, framed by the harsh, fluorescent light of the kitchen. He had come through the back alley entrance. He stepped into the freezing cooler, his slate-grey eyes locking onto her tear-stained face. "I heard about the Fed," Blue said, his voice a low rumble in the cold air. He didn't look angry. He looked intensely focused. "Did you break?" "No," Ash whispered, wiping her face quickly, suddenly ashamed of her tears. "I told him to buy a pastry or get a warrant." Blue took a slow step toward her. The air in the tiny cooler shifted, becoming thick, charged, and overwhelmingly intimate. He reached out, his large, warm hand gently gripping her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. His thumb brushed away a streak of flour from her cheek. "You did perfectly," he murmured, his eyes dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before meeting her eyes again. "You are proving to be a spectacular investment, mia pasticcera." Ash's breath hitched. In that freezing room, looking up at the most dangerous man in Boston, She realized with horrifying clarity that she wasn't just afraid of Blue Rossi anymore. She was captivated by him. 3 months later, the girl who had been dragged sobbing from a dingy South Boston apartment was gone. Ash was still a heavy woman, but the composition of her body and her spirit had radically changed. The daily grueling sessions with Victor had built a core of pure muscle beneath her curves. She no longer slouched or hid in oversized clothes. She moved through the hectic kitchen of La Bella Forno with the commanding presence of a battlefield general wearing a crisp, custom-tailored white chef's coat that hugged her waist and flared over her hips. The debt, originally $300,000, was already down by a third. The bakery was printing money, both legitimate and otherwise. But as Ash's confidence grew, so did the dangerously blurred lines of her reality at the Rossi estate. She no longer ate breakfast alone at the edge of the mahogany table. She ate with Blue. Their conversations had shifted from strict business ledgers and operational reports to quiet discussions about history, Boston's shifting political landscape, and, surprisingly, food. Blue, she learned, had a ruthlessly refined palate. He became her private taste tester, the only person allowed to critique her new recipes before they hit the storefront. Late one Thursday night, a storm was battering the Western estate. Ash couldn't sleep. Her arms ached from kneading 50 pounds of brioche dough that afternoon. She padded down to the mansion's massive, dark kitchen in her silk pajamas, craving a glass of cold milk. She froze as she walked in. Blue was sitting at the marble island, an empty glass of scotch in front of him, staring blankly at the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. His jacket was off, his tie undone, and he looked uncharacteristically exhausted. A dark purple bruise was blossoming along his jawline. "Rough night at the office?" Ash asked softly, breaking the silence. Blue's head snapped toward her, his instincts instantly flaring before he registered it was only her. The tension bled out of his shoulders. A disagreement with a supplier at the docks. It was handled. Ash walked to the refrigerator, poured 2 glasses of milk, and set one in front of him. She didn't ask for permission to sit. She just pulled out a stool next to him. "You need ice on that jaw, or you won't be able to chew the almond croissants I'm making for you tomorrow." A faint, genuine smile touched Blue's lips. It was a rare sight, and it did strange, fluttering things to Ash's stomach. "Are you giving me orders in my own house, Miss Mitchell?" "In the kitchen, yes," she replied smoothly, holding his gaze. He leaned in closer, the scent of expensive scotch, rain and danger washing over her. "You've changed, Ash. The fear is gone, replaced by—" "What?" "Survival," she whispered, her heart hammering as his gaze drifted down to her collarbone. "You told me to be formidable. I'm just following instructions." Blue reached up, his fingers lightly tracing the line of her jaw, mirroring the exact spot where his own face was bruised. His touch was electric, sparking a fire deep in her belly. "You are far more than formidable. You are turning into a queen, and queens require protection." He leaned in, his lips mere inches from hers, the air crackling with an undeniable heavy tension. Ash closed her eyes, leaning into the intoxicating gravity of the man who owned her life, ready for the kiss that had been building between them for months. Bizizizizit. Bizizizit. Blue's encrypted cell phone vibrated violently against the marble countertop, shattering the moment like glass. He cursed under his breath, pulling back and snatching the phone. "Yeah." He listened for a moment, his jaw clenching. The soft vulnerability in his eyes instantly vanished, replaced by the cold, dead stare of the enforcer. "Keep her at the door. I'm sending Sal to handle it. Do not let her inside the bakery." He hung up. "What is it?" Ash asked, the romantic fog instantly clearing. "Security at the bakery," Blue said, his voice flat. "There's a woman banging on the front doors, demanding to be let in. She's threatening to scream for the police if she isn't allowed to see the owner." Ash felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her ice cold. "My mother. Sal is 10 minutes away. He'll put her in a car and drop her somewhere she won't be found for a few days," Blue said, standing up, all business. "Go back to bed, Ash." "No." The word cracked through the quiet kitchen like a whip. Blue stopped, turning to look at her in genuine surprise. Ash stood up. Her hands were shaking, not from fear of Blue, but from a deep, volcanic rage that had been brewing inside her for 23 years. "Sal doesn't handle her. I handle her." Blue's eyes narrowed. "Ash, she is a liability. She knows the debt, and she knows I took you. If she talks to Agent Sterling, if you hurt her, or if your men make her disappear, Sterling will tear my bakery apart looking for a body," Ash interrupted, stepping right up to Blue, refusing to back down. "She's a leech. She smells money. She saw the lines outside La Bella Forno, and she wants her cut. I know how to deal with a leech." Blue stared at her, assessing the furious, beautiful fire in her eyes. For the first time, he saw a true partner standing in front of him, not a piece of collateral. He pulled his keys from his pocket. "Get dressed. We take my car." 20 minutes later, the black, sleek Maserati pulled up to the curb on a deserted, rain-slicked Hanover street. Patricia was huddled under the awning of La Bella Forno, shivering, wearing a cheap, wet coat, banging her fists against the reinforced glass door. 2 of Blue's suited guards stood silently nearby, watching her like hawks, waiting for the order to move. Ash stepped out of the car into the rain. She wore a heavy black trench coat over her clothes, her hair slicked back tightly. She looked every inch the mob boss's right hand. Patricia turned, her haggard face lighting up with greedy relief. "Ash! Oh my God, look at you! You look expensive! Let me in, it's freezing!" Ash walked up to her mother, stopping 2 feet away. She didn't unlock the door. "What do you want, Patricia?" The use of her first name made Patricia flinch. "What do I want? I want to see my daughter. I hear you own this place now. The papers say it's an LLC in your name. I knew you had it in you, kid. Listen, I'm in a little bind. A guy down in Providence. I just need 50 grand, just to tide me over. You can pull that from the register, right? We're family." "You sold me for a gambling debt," Ash said, her voice eerily calm, cutting through the sound of the rain. "You threw me to a cartel to save your own pathetic life." "I knew they wouldn't kill you," Patricia shrieked, playing the victim. "And look what happened. You're rich. You owe me, Ash. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have this place. Now give me the money, or I swear to God I'm calling the FBI. I know Rossi is behind this. I'll tell them everything." From the shadows, Blue stepped forward, his hand slipping inside his tailored jacket, his face a mask of lethal intent. Patricia gasped, stumbling backward, but Ash threw her arm out, blocking Blue's path. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on her mother. "Call them," Ash said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, gravelly whisper. Patricia blinked, confused. "What?" "Call the FBI," Ash challenged, taking a step forward, forcing her mother back into the rain. "Tell them Blue Rossi bought a bakery. Tell them you sold your daughter to him. Do you know what Agent Sterling will do, Patricia? He'll ask for proof, and when he looks at the paperwork, he'll see an LLC solely owned by Ash Mitchell. He'll see my tax returns. He'll see a perfectly legitimate business." Ash leaned in, her face inches from the woman who had tormented her for a lifetime. "And then, Blue's lawyers will file extortion charges against you. You will go to federal prison, Patricia, and you will have no protection. And no money. Patricia was trembling violently now, the bluff completely called. You wouldn't do that to your own mother. You are not my mother, Ash said, the final, heavy chain of her past snapping, setting her completely free. You are a stranger who owes the Rossi family $300,000. I am paying your debt. But if you ever come near me, my bakery, or my city ever again, I won't call the police. I'll just step aside and let Mr. Rossi collect the balance in blood. Do you understand me? Patricia looked into Ash's eyes and saw nothing but cold, unyielding iron. The soft, fat girl she used to bully was dead. The woman standing before her was a terrifying force of nature. Patricia let out a strangled sob, turned, and ran into the dark, rainy streets, disappearing into the night. Ash stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, the adrenaline crashing through her system. Slowly, Blue stepped up behind her. He didn't speak. He simply wrapped his large, warm arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his solid chest, shielding her from the rain. He pressed a kiss into the wet crown of her hair, a silent, profound declaration of absolute loyalty and fierce possession. She had just protected his empire. And in return, Blue Rossi knew, with absolute certainty, that he was going to spend the rest of his life protecting his queen. Autumn swept into Boston, painting the trees of the North End in brilliant shades of amber and crimson. Inside La Bella Forno, the scent of cinnamon, roasted apples, and brewing espresso wrapped the bakery in a warm, inviting embrace. To the outside world, Ash Mitchell was a triumphant local success story, a brilliant pastry chef who had revitalized a failing neighborhood gem. Behind the heavy steel doors of the back office, however, the temperature was rising. The syndicate's cash flow through the bakery had tripled. Blue's organization was under extreme pressure. A rival faction from New York, the Moretti family, was trying to aggressively expand into Boston's port operations, forcing Blue to liquidate physical assets into clean cash at an unprecedented rate. Ash felt the strain. She and Blue were no longer just business associates. Their relationship had evolved in the quiet, stolen hours of the night at the Western estate. He was her protector, her mentor, and increasingly, her lover. But their romance was a heavily guarded secret. To the men of the Rossi syndicate, she was strictly the boss's investment. Blue knew that if his enemies, or the FBI, realized she was his heart, she would become his greatest vulnerability. The fracture began on a bustling Friday morning. Ash was in the kitchen, meticulously scoring the tops of artisanal sourdough loaves, when she noticed Rosa, her assistant baker, lingering near the hallway that led to the private office. Rosa had always been bitter about Ash's sudden promotion, but lately her resentment had morphed into a nervous, jittery energy. Ash watched out of the corner of her eye as Rosa quickly typed something into her phone, looked over her shoulder, and slipped down the hall. Wiping her flour-coated hands on her apron, Ash followed silently. She rounded the corner just in time to see Rosa kneeling by the baseboard near the office door, her hand wedged behind a loose piece of trim. "Looking for a dropped pastry, Rosa?" Ash asked, her voice echoing coldly in the narrow hallway. Rosa gasped, violently jerking her hand back. She scrambled to her feet, her face flushing a deep, guilty red. I dropped my earring. It rolled under." Ash didn't buy it for a second. She stepped forward, her physical presence imposing, effectively blocking Rosa's exit. "Go back to the front counter. If I catch you near this office again, you won't just be fired. I'll have Sal walk you to your car." Rosa swallowed hard, her eyes darting away as she scurried past Ash. Unease settled heavy in Ash's gut. She immediately called Blue on the encrypted burner phone he had given her. "Blue, something is wrong with Rosa. I caught her creeping around the office baseboards." There was a tense silence on the line. "Lock the office," Blue ordered, his voice tight. "I'm sending a sweep team. Do not let her out of your sight, but act completely normal." But they were too late. Less than an hour later, the peaceful hum of the bakery was shattered. 3 black SUVs aggressively jumped the curb on Hanover Street, tires screeching. The glass doors flew open, and a dozen armed agents in tactical vests poured into the shop, shouting for customers to drop to the floor. Leading them was Special Agent Thomas Sterling. "FBI, nobody move!" Sterling barked, his eyes scanning the chaotic room until they locked onto Ash standing behind the pastry case. He offered her a predatory, triumphant smile. "Good afternoon, Miss Mitchell. We have a federal search warrant for these premises." Ash's blood ran cold, but her intense training with Blue kicked in. She kept her face, an impassive mask, refusing to show fear. "You are scaring my customers, Agent Sterling. Show me the warrant." Sterling slammed a thick stack of papers onto the glass counter, cracking it. "Save the tough girl act. I know exactly what you've been doing for Rossi, and I know exactly where the proof is." Sterling didn't even bother tearing apart the kitchen. He marched directly down the hallway toward the back office. Ash's heart hammered against her ribs. She watched, paralyzed, as Sterling knelt by the exact piece of baseboard where Rosa had been lurking. He pried the wood away and pulled out a small, black, magnetic lockbox. Ash felt the air leave her lungs. She looked over at the kitchen doors. Rosa was standing there, staring at the ground, trembling. She had planted it. Sterling popped the lockbox open. Inside was a heavy encrypted flash drive. He held it up like a hunting trophy. The secondary ledgers, the real books, money laundering, racketeering, and wire fraud. He turned to a tactical agent. "Cuff her." 2 agents grabbed Ash, violently wrenching her arms behind her back. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit cruelly into her wrists. "Ash Mitchell, you are under arrest for federal money laundering and conspiracy," Sterling recited, stepping close enough that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Blue Rossi is going away for life. And unless you want to rot in a federal penitentiary for the next 30 years, you are going to testify against him." As they dragged her out of her own bakery, past the terrified customers and the flashing lights of the police cruisers, Ash looked up at the rooftops across the street. Standing in the shadows of a brick chimney, barely visible in the autumn gloom, was Blue. His fists were clenched at his sides, his jaw set in a line of pure, helpless fury. He couldn't intervene without starting a shootout that would undoubtedly get her killed. She held his gaze for a fleeting second, pouring all her strength into that single look, silently promising him that she would not break. The interrogation room in the JFK Federal Building was cold, sterile, and relentless. Ash had been chained to a steel chair for 6 hours. No water, no lawyer, no answers. She steadied herself with slow, controlled breaths, clinging to the discipline she had learned the hard way. Agent Sterling entered with confidence, dropping a thick file onto the table. He claimed they had everything: witness testimony, financial records, even a flash drive already being decrypted. He painted Ash as a victim, offering immunity if she testified against Rossi. When she didn't respond, his tone sharpened into a threat. Ash finally looked up, calm and unshaken. "I want my phone call, and a lawyer." Before Sterling could press further, the door opened. A sharply dressed lawyer stepped in, introducing himself as Ari Penhaligon, counsel for the Rossi family. He placed a document on the table and gave Sterling 10 seconds to release Ash. Sterling's confidence cracked as he read it. The evidence they seized wasn't financial data. It was proof of corruption within their own task force. For the first time, Ash felt the shift. This wasn't her downfall. It was theirs. "You set me up," Sterling whispered, his hands shaking as he looked at Ash. "Take the cuffs off, Thomas," Penhaligon ordered, his tone suddenly lethal, "or Miss Mitchell will walk out of here into a press conference and tell the world how you tried to frame an innocent baker to cover up your own unit's corruption." Sterling, defeated, completely outplayed, and facing his own impending arrest, silently reached over and unlocked Ash's handcuffs. Ash stood up. She rubbed her raw wrists, squared her shoulders, and walked out of the interrogation room without looking back. When she stepped out of the heavy glass doors of the federal building, it was pouring rain. The Boston skyline was dark, but a sleek, black Maserati was idling at the curb. The back door opened. Ash slid into the warm leather interior. Blue was waiting. He looked exhausted, his tie discarded, his dark hair slightly messy, but his slate-grey eyes burned with a fierce, possessive relief when he looked at her. He reached out, his large hands gently taking her bruised wrists, inspecting the red marks left by the steel cuffs, his jaw clenched in fury. "Did you doubt me?" he asked quietly, his thumb lightly tracing the sensitive skin of her palm. "Never," Ash breathed, leaning into his touch. "I knew you were 10 steps ahead. You used Rosa." "I used her treason to eliminate Sterling and blind the feds," Blue corrected, pulling her closer. "But I couldn't tell you the plan. If Sterling saw even an ounce of deception in your eyes, he wouldn't have taken the bait. You had to believe it was real. For that, I am sorry." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of heavy parchment paper. He handed it to her. Ash opened it. It was the original ledger contract of her mother's debt. The sum of $300,000 was written in bold ink. Across the document, stamped in stark red letters, was the word, "Paid in full." "The debt is cleared, Ash," Blue said, his voice dropping to a low, emotional rasp. He wasn't looking at her like a mob boss assessing an asset. He was looking at her like a man terrified of losing the only thing that mattered to him. "You are free. You own the bakery, free and clear. You can walk away right now. I will ensure you are never bothered by my world or your mother, ever again." Ash stared at the paper. 6 months ago, this piece of paper was her absolute worst nightmare. It had represented the end of her life. Now, sitting next to the most dangerous man in the city, she realized it had actually been her beginning. He had broken her down, yes, but he had forced her to build herself into something unbreakable. He hadn't just given her a bakery, he had given her power. Ash didn't hesitate. She took the debt contract, gripped it tightly in both hands, and ripped it straight down the middle. She ripped it again, and again, until it was nothing but confetti, and dropped the pieces onto the floor of the Maserati. Blue's breath hitched. "Ash, I'm not going anywhere, Blue," she whispered fiercely. She reached up, weaving her fingers into his dark hair, pulling his face down to hers. "I am exactly where I belong. And we have a bakery to open tomorrow." Blue let out a ragged sigh, a sound of absolute surrender, before his lips crashed down onto hers. It was a kiss that tasted of rain, danger, and total, uncompromising victory. The fat girl from South Boston hadn't just survived the mob, she had conquered it, completely claiming the heart of its king. Ash Mitchell's journey from a discarded, terrified girl to the fierce, unbreakable queen of a mafia empire is nothing short of incredible. She didn't just survive the darkest hand life dealt her. She completely rewrote the rules and claimed the heart of Boston's most dangerous man. What did you think of Blue's brilliant, risky plan to take down Agent Sterling? Would you have torn up that debt contract and stayed by his side, or taken your bakery and walked away into the sunset as a free woman? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If Ash's epic transformation and this intense mafia romance kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and share this video with your fellow drama lovers. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our next thrilling story.